Hello there, and welcome to the Scruffy-Looking Nerd Hooders podcast. I'm your host, Tyler, bringing you all things nerd and geek-related. And in this episode, I'm going to be touching on, is Bruce Wayne an atheist? I'm going to be talking about the most recent influx of cyberbullying with celebrities on social media, and I'm going to be answering questions that you, the listeners, have asked me. Alright, and jumping right into it. So, recently, an issue of Batman came out. I believe it was issue number 53. And a topic of discussion from this new issue was a new issue. And it was essentially this huge group of readers who were extremely pissed that DC is essentially, in their eyes, making Bruce Wayne an atheist. Now, I touched on this a little bit on Instagram. My take on this is, like I said on Instagram, he's already been written as Episcopalian. He's been written as Catholic. He's been written as Buddhist, I believe, at one point. And different writers have even came out and said, no, Bruce Wayne is, Catholic. Oh, no, I wrote Bruce Wayne to be Episcopalian. Well, so what if he's an atheist? I mean, and it's not even like the writer himself even said, hey, I didn't write him this way. If this is how you perceived it, it's up to your interpretation. And one thing people need to keep in mind, and like I said, I touched on this on Instagram as well, is this is a character, and keep in mind, a fictional character, but still, like, if you want to dissect this, like, he's a character who essentially saw his parents get murdered in front of him. Like, he witnessed it firsthand. And his adopted son was killed. His blood son was killed. He's, like, witnessed friends and colleagues taken from him in brutal fashions. And not to mention, most recently, Selena Kyle left him at the altar. Like, they didn't get married. So, like, he's, as a person, that's a lot of stuff to be happening to a person. For them to not question their beliefs or, like, where they are, what they stand for, that would be poor writing if they didn't do that. So, if anything, this new story arc that they're investigating with Bruce Wayne, it's totally good writing. Like, it makes sense. And I feel like that this is what they should be doing, because, I mean, how many times can you touch on a subject and keep it the same? Like, I mean, he was Episcopalian at one point, he was Catholic at another point, but I mean, tomato at that point, this is, branching out to a new, ideals for a character. And, if his ideology is, he is an atheist, or, he doesn't believe, he has no faith anymore, or whatever you want to say, then this is going to open up new doors for him as a character. Does he, go back on other things? Are we going to see Bruce Wayne start using actual firearms and stuff like that now in the comics, whereas he, was against it? Well, I mean, for the most part, he was against it. At other points, he has used firearms, despite what fanboys say. So, yeah, I mean, what is your guys' take on this? Do you think, that this is something that shouldn't be touched on? Do you feel like this is, they shouldn't be touching on these kinds of things? Because I know, religion and, a lack of a belief system is a huge topic of discussion, especially, it can start arguments, I guess, is the proper way to put this. But I don't know. I feel like this is something cool, because, like, I'm not a huge DC Comics fan, but I think it's cool that they're exploring these kinds of story arcs with their characters. I think it's great, and I hope that it kind of carries over into other characters. I mean, not necessarily this, but exploring new things with these characters that they haven't explored before. I think it's going to be great. I really look forward to the rest of this story arc for the Batman comics. All right, and moving on to my next topic I want to talk about. So a while ago, and I'm sure most of you who are listening probably know this, Kelly Marie Tran, the one who played Rose on The Last Jedi, people essentially, which I wouldn't even call them people, pieces of crap, went to social media and essentially harassed her and sent her death threats, sent her rape threats. They went to her character's Wikipedia page and was just putting a bunch of racist stuff on there on the character's Wikipedia page. And she left social media, and she finally came out and, first time since then, and, spoke up about everything that's been going on, why she did what she did. And so I'm not really going to touch on that. My problem with this whole thing is these people who went out of their way to do this. These are people who even when I was a kid, and I'm only 30. When I was a kid, all the way through high school, Star Wars wasn't cool. Even when the prequel movies were coming out, it was still you like Star Wars? You're a freaking nerd. It wasn't a cool thing. Star Wars wasn't cool. Comic books weren't cool. Video games had just started to become a mainstream, oh, that's cool, kind of thing. Halo was out and all that stuff. It was more acceptable, socially acceptable at that point to be a gamer. But Star Wars wasn't cool. And so I grew up getting chastised for that. And now Star Wars is cool. And I'm totally okay with it. The more people who enjoy Star Wars, the more people who are open about enjoying something. Outside of illegal activities and harming other people, you should never feel guilty about something that you enjoy. And so the more people that are open about enjoying Star Wars, that's awesome. And so but I remember feeling like crap when people would tell me that, oh, you're a fucking lame ass, you like Star Wars, or you're freaking lame, you like Star Wars. That, I remember how that felt. And so these same people who I'm pretty sure grew up in that same time, that same era as I did of it not being cool, they're treating people like crap. And it's how this feels, but you're doing it. You're gatekeeping at that point. And I just don't understand that logic. And I don't know if it's just because of her being a woman. I'm not going to dive into that whole thing, because that would be a 3-hour long podcast episode. But I don't know what the insecurity is, but it's something, and I don't understand it. It happened with video games. Women have been, there's been gatekeepers for gaming for women. There's, you go to any woman's Twitch stream and you will find people in the chat just harassing them. It's ridiculous. And so, I mean, with this cyberbullying stuff, it just doesn't make sense, because nerds that grew up in the era of being bullied for liking nerdy stuff, we know what it's like. We know how it feels. And so for you to do this to other people, you're essentially a same part of that, dogma that you've hated your whole life. You're a part of it now, because you're furthering that. And so logically it doesn't make sense. And so I challenge all of you guys, if you see any of that kind of stuff happening, speak up. Put an end to it. Say something, and hey, you're freaking stupid. Whatever it is you want to say it. Put an end to it. We need to put an end to this, because this is toxic behavior, and it needs to stop. Because I've seen it in comics. I've seen, with comic book fans. I've seen it with, video games. Like I said, it still happens in gaming. And then I've seen it with most recently, tabletop games. And I guess one thing I'm really thankful for is shows like Critical Role and Shield of Tomorrow and most recently Callisto 6. All those Geek and Sundry shows, they're super inclusive, and they showcase a wide variety of individuals, the players themselves, and the players showcase a wide variety of characters. And it's like super inclusive, and it's awesome that they put a stop to that kind of crap. And it's really cool to see them speak up on the platform that they're on to essentially, like, you know, from there I put like, hey, like, this isn't acceptable. Like, this isn't how this community is. Like, you know, because they also remember, you know, this kind of stuff not being cool, like even just 10 years ago. But now that it is cool, you know, like, all these toxic people are going to latch onto it too. And so, like, we need to make sure we put a stop to it. So that's kind of like my short little mini rant, I guess you could say. But moving on, the next segment I want to do, it's the first time I'm doing it, and I'm just kind of testing the waters to see how well it is. But I posted on social media and like Facebook, Instagram. I believe I also did it on Twitter. And I also did it on a couple of Discord channels that I'm a part of, which I also have my own Discord for this podcast and the community that listens to it. And I will post a link in the show notes, or the doobly-doo, as Matthew Coville calls it. But anyway, so question and answers. Here's what I got on those various social medias. So Ray from Facebook asks, deep dish or hand toss or thin crust? So my favorite food, which a lot of people know this, but my favorite food is pizza. And I grew up in a kind of a small town. We only had like 3 or 4 pizza places, all the major chains. But my go-to out of like the major chains, and this is going to sound gross because a lot of people, they've said that it's kind of trashy, but I love Little Caesars pizza. I mean, it's like $5. You go in and you get like pepperoni, sausage, or cheese, whatever, and it's super good. But if I had to choose all-time favorite kind of pizza, I would have to say first place would definitely have to be deep dish, like Chicago-style deep dish, because it's a pie, and it's so good. But I lived up in the St. Louis area briefly. Briefly, it was about 6 years. And everyone up there is like head over heels for Emo's Pizza, which I don't know if you've ever had Emo's Pizza, but it is absolute garbage. It's cracker thin crust and like really bad tasting sauce, and it has like it has Provel cheese on it, which is like a combination of like 3 or 4 different cheeses that just don't mesh well together, and they're like super like stingy with like the toppings, and it's wicked expensive. I can eat like an entire pizza and I'm starving by the end of it because there's just nothing there. And so thin crust is bullcrap. I hate it. And my second favorite would probably have to be New York style, because even though it's thin crust, it's hand tossed, and there's like something to it, you know, like it at least tastes good. So the second question, Jason from Facebook asks, why can't Master Chief get promoted? Well, let's see, why can't he get promoted? Probably because he's like never really on like any sort of way to get promoted. I mean, he's always off doing missions and stuff. So I can't remember the last time he was on a ship, but I also haven't played a Halo story campaign mode since like Halo 4. So I'm a little out of the loop on Halo lore here. So from Discord, Aller, she asks, what's your favorite MMO? So my favorite MMO, it wasn't really an MMO. It was kind of just like an online RPG, but it was the original Guild Wars. And that game, like, always holds a place in my heart. I loved it. But it's a tie because my favorite, like, actual MMO would have to be Star Wars Galaxies. I loved that game. May it rest in peace. I tried to go back and play the fan server, like the server that fans are hosting of the Star Wars Galaxies, the original pre-new game experience update. And I don't know, some things are just best left in the past. I want my nostalgia filter to forever remain on that game. So so this is kind of like a couple